Hey everyone, welcome to TowerGate. It is day 33 and it is April the 5th, 2017. Well. I want to start today's video, have a little bit of fun. Just want to ask a little question here and I would like you to respond below in the comments section. I'd like to give you two different scenarios and ask you which of those two scenarios you think would be most likely. Okay, Scenario A. Scenario A is, how likely do you think it would be that we would find one of Bill Clinton's interns wrapped in a tarp underneath the coffin and grave of Vince Foster, compared to B, how likely is it that the Obama administration spied on the Trump team? Would like you to put your comments in the section below. Which of these is most likely? Option A, that we would find one of Bill Clinton's interns wrapped in a tarp underneath the body of Vince Foster in his grave? Or option B, is it more likely that we would have the Obama administration surveilling the Trump team during the 2016 presidential election? Please put your comments below, option A or option B. Thank you very much. Now, let's just move on to the events of the day. Of course, still more fallout from the Susan Rice revelations and her follow-up interview with MSNBC, where she didn't actually answer any questions. She did not confirm or deny in word, I should say. She didn't confirm or deny that she was involved in unmasking or anything like that. She gave basically non-denial denials. But it raises a more interesting question, because she did go into some detail into, as she was talking around and dancing around the question that she was being asked about being the unmasker, or having anything to do with creating these spreadsheets and spreading this throughout the intelligence community. She went into a little bit of a conversation there where I think she dug herself a bit of a hole, because she begins to describe how sometimes she would come across information she would need to have a name unmasked in order to understand the context of what was going on. Well, the only problem with all this is that she was the national security advisor. Her job is to advise the president on national security. She spends most of her time dealing in that issue, working on issues of national security, and spends quite a bit of time hanging around at the UN in New York. And so why in the world was a national security advisor getting involved in the unmasking of names, or trying to figure out who was doing this, who was saying this, and why? Because that's not the role of the national security advisor. That is the role of the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, the DIA, or any of the three-letter alphabet agencies. It's not really the role of the national security advisor to do investigations into espionage or potential espionage. In fact, it would generally work the other way around. Generally, this information will be learned by the FBI or by one of the intelligence agencies, and then in a meeting, generally with the president and the staff around, as they're having a conversation in a meeting, the intelligence community or the FBI director would say, hey, by the way, National Security Advisor Rice, we think it's important that you know we've been working on this and we found this, this, or this. She would generally be the one being informed about information like this as a result of investigations which may have required unmasking. Why was the National Security Advisor involved in investigations and unmasking of people in conversations? What role was she had to play in that? That's not really the role of the National Security Advisor. And in fact, even if she had learned about something through some contacts, through the UN or someone else, generally what she would do is go to the president, or possibly go to, and I'm sure she would go to the president first, and then he or she or both or one or the other, maybe together, they would then go to the Department of Justice and say, hey, we've discovered this, maybe you ought to have the FBI look into this, in which case the FBI would begin an investigation, an espionage investigation. They would call on the NSA or the CIA to access certain tools and things that they have at their disposal to help them and work on unraveling this espionage. It's not really the role of the National Security Advisor. So why in the world was Susan Rice even involved in this type of thing at the investigative level? That's a very good question. And I certainly hope someone asks her that question. I'm sure that they will. Here's another interesting thing, because we didn't have any great bombshells today because we're still getting the fallout from the Rice revelations. But here's something I noticed last night when I was watching a video of our good friend Adam Schiff. For those of you who don't know who Adam Schiff, of course, is the highest-ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, that's looking into all things Russia. Or actually, he's in the House. And if you've been watching Schiff for the past 2 or 3 weeks, he's been on MSNBC or CNN or talking to some liberal news network every day, multiple times a day, giving interviews, talking all about it, calling for Nunes to step down, upset because Nunes didn't share this information with him and the other people on the committee. He's been totally dissing the entire idea that there may have been Trump surveillance, and instead focusing all his attention on the Russian narrative that Trump was colluding with the Russians to hack the election or what have you. And but last week, I think it was in fact a week ago today, I think last Wednesday or Thursday, Adam Schiff was finally shown those logs that Nunes was shown 2 weeks prior. And since he's had a chance to review those logs, Adam Schiff has drastically changed his demeanor and his language. Both language and demeanor are drastically changed. He's now not calling for Nunes to step down anymore. He's not saying anything about Nunes, really. He is also spending his time doing other things. He's not doing too many TV interviews now since he saw that information, since he saw those logs. But what he has said when he has done what few interviews he's done since then is he has basically said when answering questions now, he's not really pushing the same narrative he was before. He's now saying, well, we really don't know. We're just going to have to get more information. We're going to have to look into it. This is going to have to be investigated. We're going to have to bring people in, blah, 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 blah. He's dancing around. He's dancing around because he's seen those logs. He's seen exactly what Nunes was talking about. He knows that this unmasked conversation had nothing to do with Russia, and he now realizes that he has stuck his foot squarely in his mouth. So before he goes any farther down that hole, he is now going to change his track, because he realizes that this is drastically going to change the way this investigation moves. He's realizing now that the air is coming out of the balloon of the false Russian narrative, and that the other narrative that Trump was being spied on, that there is now coming forth more and more evidence to suggest that that was true. So Schiff is now realizing that the tide is turning, and that the Russian narrative, which is hanging by a very thin thread, is starting to go away. As I mentioned, Crowdsource is the company who did the investigation of the DNC servers. They wouldn't allow the FBI to look at their servers. But as I've stated in several videos recently, Crowdsource is now backing away from their findings. And about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when I was looking at this, you could Google it and find about 5, maybe 7, 8 pages on this. I went through all these pages until I ran out of stories. Now you can Google Crowdsource changing opinion of Russian hacking. You can now Google that and you'll find about 50 pages. So it's starting to percolate its way to the surface. I know that Tucker Carlson did touch on it just a couple of times when he was engaged in political combat with a couple of liberals. Sean Hannity brought it up just a little bit, but they haven't really focused on this particular issue, and I think this is one they really need to focus a lot on, because almost the entire Russian story, hacking story, the narrative, is based on the idea that they have proof that Russia hacked the DNC, when in fact most of us know that it's very likely that Seth Rich was a leaker who found out, who was a Bernie Sanders supporter, who found out that Bernie was being cheated. It obviously upset him, so he leaked the documents to WikiLeaks. And in fact, this is what the DNC did not want the FBI to discover. And so they called in a group of people who despise Russia and love Democrats, despise Trump and love Hillary Clinton, Crowdsource. They called Crowdsource in to do this investigation, to who's acting then as the client for the DNC. And of course, you always produce what your client wants, don't you? So, this is something that I think is really important, and I am going to be contacting Nunes' staff at his congressional office, as well as a couple other members on that committee, and letting them know, if they're not already aware of it, that CrowdStrike is now backing away from their claims that it was Russia that was doing the hacking. That Dancing Bear, the code word used for the Russian hackers, may not be Russian at all. They might be CIA. And who was head of the CIA at that point? John Brennan, a man who went on TV several times a couple weeks before the election, and beat up on Trump pretty good, and threw his full support behind Hillary Clinton. So we definitely need to talk to John Brennan, don't we? So, watching Adam Schiff, I can see that the tide is turning. And we have to remember that the entire narrative for this going after Trump and having the collusion is all based on the Russians allegedly hacking the DNC and trying to work with Trump to overturn the election or fix the election or what have you. When this narrative is destroyed, and it's on its way to being destroyed, when it is finally destroyed, it's like the emperor will no longer have any clothes. This is everything that they're saying on the Democrat side is based on this narrative. Once this narrative falls away, then they have nothing to defend themselves. No reason anymore to say that they were conducting surveillance on the Trump team because of their collusion with Russia, because it will then be known that there was no collusion with Russia, and that they knew there was no collusion with Russia, and they knew that there was no hacking of the DNC by Russia, because they'll learn that the hacking was done either by the CIA, if there was hacking at all, but that Julian Assange is correct when he says there was no Russian involvement. And in fact, the truth of the matter is that Seth Rich, who's now at room temperature, about 12 feet below ground, pushing up flowers, was probably the individual who leaked the documents. So, as I say, I will forward this information to the committees and that are looking into this, and make sure that they need to have the two primary owners of CrowdStrike in for hearings. There's some very good questions that you could ask them. Fortunately, they've made so many public statements about their strong support for Hillary, about their strong dislike for Trump, and their extreme hatred for Russia, that it should not be hard to figure out where their political persuasion is, what their political motivations may have been. My friends, this is all coming to a head. You know, I compare this a lot to Watergate. Back in Watergate, of course, it took 2.5 years to unravel that. And it took about a year, over a year, about a year and a half before they finally were able to get a name of someone who was within the inside in the White House of the Nixon White House. Prior to that year and a half, everything that they were learning was all on the peripheral. They didn't actually get someone inside the Nixon White House on the committee to re-elect, or CREEP, was the sort of acronym for the group that was the people raising money for the Nixon campaign. They weren't actually able to get inside the White House for over a year and a half. And when they got inside the White House, by finding one of the individuals who controlled the fund, controlled the money that was used to pay the plumbers to break into the Watergate Hotel, as well as many other nefarious political activities, some of them illegal, including breaking into the offices of Dr. Fielding to get dirt on, what's his name, the man who released the Pentagon Papers. So, what we have learned is that as in just 33 days of this particular sordid affair, we now have a person very high inside the Obama White House. Didn't take a year and a half. Took less than 33 days. We now know that someone very high in ranking inside the Obama White House, Susan Rice, was unmasking. Why was she unmasking? That's the big question. Was Obama aware of that? Was she actually creating these spreadsheets? She denies it. Was she spreading this information? She denies it. Of course, she wasn't under oath. I think they need to get Susan Rice in there, get her under oath, and they certainly need to ask her all of these questions. Okay, so it is day 33, April the 5th, 2017. The questions about Susan Rice continue. Apparently Adam Schiff, after reviewing the logs, has drastically changed his tone and his language. He clearly understands that the ship is going down. CrowdStrike is now changing their opinion. And we still have WikiLeaks. So this is moving a little faster than what I thought it would move, and there's a lot of pressure being brought. There's a lot of people asking a lot of questions, and I think that this may not take as long as Watergate. Maybe we'll get this one done in half that time. But it appears to me that the two most important people I want to see being interviewed, or three most important people right now in the House Intelligence Committee, would be Susan Rice, obviously, and of course John Brennan. Let's not forget John Brennan. He needs to also answer some questions. Comey's a waste of time. He doesn't actually answer any questions, so I wouldn't even waste my time talking to Comey anymore. But these two guys from CrowdStrike, apparently it appears that they have not testified in front of the Senate committee. It appears that they may not be testifying. They've basically had other people speaking on their behalf. So you really need to get these guys in there, and I certainly hope the House does, because they're not professional politicians. They're not professional spinmeisters. They're probably talking to some of those people now, but they themselves are not. But the fact is, they are on record making statements that would make a lawyer's job or an interrogator or investigator's job very easy, because they are in print making statements that you can just simply ask them, "Sir, did you say this, this, and this, and this?" They really can't deny it. They said it. It was repeated over and over and over throughout the media, and there's no way they can walk it back. And it's pretty obvious who these people support and what their motives are. So it's all unraveling, but I think the real key to it, and where I think the House should really focus their energy right now, is on crowdsource, because they are the source of the Russian hacking narrative. When that narrative goes away, that means that everything that was done regarding anything, because the reason that they're going to use for the surveillance, the reason that Susan Rice, the excuse that they're going to have when these people, John Brennan, Susan Rice, whoever they bring in, once they find out the role they had in the unmasking or spreading of intelligence or what have you, their entire, their safety blanket, their get out of jail free card is going to be wrapped up in the Russian narrative. If the Russian narrative doesn't exist, they're left naked and exposed. In fact, they're even in bigger trouble, because now the next few questions that have to be asked is if in fact there wasn't a hacking into the by the Russians into the DN server, then was there any hacking at all? And if not, was it just that maybe someone leaked it? And could that person have been Seth Rich? That's still an unsolved murder. I think we might be able to solve that murder if we ask a few questions. It will also raise the other question, which is, if in fact we did find all these log entries from Sugar Bear, which is the code word for the Russians, the name I guess supposedly used by crowdsourced as to identify the Russian hackers, maybe Sugar Bear or Honey Bear or whatever bear he was, maybe he works at the CIA. You see where I'm going, folks? Whew. Okay, so finally, to finish up this video, just one more time, just would want to thank everyone for subscribing to my channel. And also, today I'm just asking kind of a fun question, and if you would comment in the comment section below, I would love to hear what you all think in the comment section of the question I ask at the beginning of the video. I'll repeat it one more time before I go, and that is, which is more likely, that we would find the body of one of Bill Clinton's interns wrapped in a quilt or wrapped in a tarp and being placed underneath the body or the casket of the gravesite of Vince Foster, or is it more likely, option B, that we would find the Obama administration surveilled the Trump team? Very interesting question, I think. So leave your answer in the comment section below, either A or B, and I'll look forward to reading your comments. and continue watching the story. And I'm also working really hard, digging more into a couple other things, particularly with the crowdsource and things like that. So I'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll take a look at what tomorrow brings in the next bit of information that may come out, the next drip, and the continuing saga of TowerGate. Y'all have a good night. Oh, for those of you who are expecting these really bad storms and tornadoes and stuff, they're about 2 hours away from here. I was just checking the radar. Y'all buckle down the hatches, man, and hopefully tomorrow I'll be reporting back to you, and I'll still have a roof on my house. Okay? Y'all take care. Have a good night. Be safe.